Hi, everybody. Tim Hughes here. I'm the CEO and co-founder of DLA Ignite. Today, I've got Jessica Pryce-Jones with me today, and we're going to be talking about intuition at work. Jess, where can people find you?
The easiest place to find me is on LinkedIn, and that's a place that I like to be found. So yeah, it'd be great to connect with anybody who wants to.
So you've written this great book called Intuition at Work, Using Your Gut Feelings to Get Ahead. Now, I must admit, when I got this, I was very confused.
Say some more.
Well, because I read so many books where you're told that the data is so important. It's data this and data that, and we've got to look in the data. And here we are. You're telling me I need to actually use my intuition. So, what was the inspiration for the book, first and foremost?
I really knew I had to write it when I was coaching a senior exec who had wanted to. He wanted to give someone a promotion in his team, and he'd gone out. This woman would need to be interacting with lots of different other teams, and he'd gone out to his peers to say, "What do you think?" And his peers had said, "No, don't do it." And he came back to me, and we had a very, very short conversation because I said to him, "Well, it doesn't matter what they think. Well, what do you feel? I mean, truly, in your gut, will she be successful? Project ahead 6 months." And he was silent for 10 seconds, and he said, "Yes, she will be." And I said, "So what do you want to do?" And he said, I'm going to give her the promotion." And I said, "Think we're done, aren't we?" And so it's such a fast track to, oh, by the way, it did work out, right? She was the right hire. She did excel. Everybody else changed their mind. So that's the kind of the key of this. So when your intuition is working really well, it fast tracks stuff.
So how do you define intuition? And why is it different from sort of analytical thinking?
Okay, so for me, lots of people say intuition is knowing something without knowing how you know it. But I define it more as a feeling of knowing, because there's often this sense of, I feel aligned, that's the right thing internally, or I don't feel aligned, I need to go away and get some more information. So that's why I talk about it as a feeling of knowing. And what we need to do is we need to pair this feeling of knowing, or it's right or wrong, with the analysis and the data. And it doesn't really matter which order you do it in. So you can have a bunch of data and you sit back and go, what am I feeling about this? Because quite often, I mean, data is no more accurate than intuition, interestingly. Both are about 80% right, but
Right.
not more than that.
So this is that sort of feeling where you go, it's in my sort of Spider-Man senses where I can kind of feel something is right or wrong, but you don't actually have the data to cover it.
No, but you might also have this kind of spidey sense and then go away and get the data. So it doesn't matter which comes first, but it's using the both can only improve the decisions that you make. So it's
So
both.
so what are the big misconceptions about intuition?
I think one of the big misconceptions is that it's like woo woo, and you've got to call in your angels and all of that. And by the way, if that's you, fine, do it. But it's actually this informed sense that we have of whether something is correct or incorrect. And so it's just a matter of paying attention and observing your own inner sense about what's going on. And your hands tingling, do you get a constricted throat? Do you feel a sense of energy for something or not? And this is all information, and that information is so precious and valuable. And we know that because 99% of CEOs, that's 99%, say that they use their intuition to make decisions. And that's because it's so helpful in volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous situations, which is, let's face it, what we're all dealing with today.
Because I mean, there's certain decisions that we make in life where we actually kind of use our intuition. For example, quite often, our significant partner, we're making a significant commitment to somebody for the rest of our lives, or for a large chunk of time, and saying, yes, I'm going to do that. Or we walk into a house and go, yeah, this is the house for us. And when you buy, what's the data? Well, it's got this and it's got this and it doesn't have, and yeah, okay, it hasn't got the garage you wanted and that, but ultimately this is the house that we want to live in. What other examples can you give in terms of where you can see intuition actually working?
So it works really well when you're trying to make a strategic decision in a team. And there is such a thing as team intuition. And it's not the brainstorming stuff, it's the evolution of a conversation that everybody feels aligned with. And so there's new research coming out, really exciting stuff about this team intuition. So we see it well working in strategic decision making at senior levels. We see it working really well in hires, particularly of jobs, which jobs now are changing so much. And when you write a job spec, it often doesn't capture what someone really will have to do because the landscape is moving so quickly. So it works well. It works really well there. It works really well in, do I stay or do I go? Do I can this project? Do I not? Do we invest here? Do we not? So those kind of big decisions, and the intuition that you have when you try to explain is never as powerful as the sense and the feeling that you have at the time. And that's the really hard thing about intuition, that explaining it, you lose the magic of the feeling that you have.
Because it's interesting. One of the things that you say is that as in fact you see intuition getting, you're using more intuition the higher you go up in an organization, which is kind of disingenuous with what society seems to tell us, which is the higher we go up in an organization, the more data we should be using.
Yeah, and isn't it interesting? And I don't know, because when you look at that information, you go, is it because it's acceptable to talk about it at CEO level? And I suspect that part of it is that acceptability, but it's also the training that you've had, because you put me in a situation that I know about and I can be intuitive, but put me into another one and I'll find it much harder. And yes, there is such a thing as non-expert intuition, but it's much harder to trust yourself. So I think that the seniority thing is also to do with the experience thing.
And because if you think about some terms that we have in business, one is a classic one is due diligence, which is where there's a decision being made to actually buy an organization and then the data is looked at. But to actually decide whether you're actually going to buy that organization, before the due diligence, it was all gut reaction.
Yeah.
Because it is intuition. Do we want to buy that?
Yeah.
Yes, no. If it's yes, okay, we're going to get the data to decide if it's going to back our intuition.
Yeah, absolutely. And people talk a lot about fit. Are they going to be a good fit? Is it going to be a cultural fit? This is all words for, do we intuitively feel that these people are the right people for us? Because you have so very little to go on in those situations. So you'll have tons of conversations with people, but still it's a sense of, yes, it feels right, or no, it doesn't feel right. And when you do the no, it doesn't feel right, my God, you get value destroyed. Intense, amazing value destroyed from doing the wrong mergers and acquisitions. I've seen it happen so often. I'm dealing with another one right here and now, where there's a demerger happening because it was never the right fit.
Yeah, I've interviewed someone here on here that advises companies on mergers and acquisitions, and it's and they can be pretty horrific. So what can us as individuals do to, because we're kind of told, no, you need to be data driven. So what can we do to kind of set ourselves free? Because you talk about it in the book about actually learning to actually develop our intuition skills.
Yeah, I think that the first thing is to listen to yourself. And we're taught about all this active listening stuff and how we need to go away and actively listen to others. I think we also really need to listen to ourselves. And I was chatting with a guy who was doing incredible stuff in Glasgow, building new homes. And he said, the thing I tell people all the time is listen to yourself. We can put a man on the moon, but we don't listen to ourselves. So it is to take that step back and allow yourself a tiny, minuscule amount of time to go, okay, what's going on for me? and in what's going on for me, what do I sense is going on for others? And you can then test it. So I think the most important thing about learning to use your intuition is to get feedback on what you're intuiting, because that's how you school yourself and educate yourself into whether this thing is working, or that was guesswork, or that was wishful thinking, or maybe that was a bit of bias creeping in there. So it's the feedback, and to learn to do it with the small things, because you're never going to make a big decision using your intuition if you haven't made quite a few small ones. And so it's what are those small ones that you can test out to go, oh yeah, that's pretty cool, I'm on track.
And what's, because you talk in the book, there's a kind of a exercise that you talk about, which you say is about just start off small about using the intuition, and then start building and building and building and building in a kind of a, it's not like meditation, but in a way of because we are so told to live within certain boundaries, aren't we, and to respect the data, that we've actually had all our intuition switched off.
Totally. And that happened to me, you know, when I was a graduate trainee in my first job, working for a financial institution. I was asked what I think. One of my first meetings, you know, what does the graduate think? And I knew it was slightly kind of snarky, you know, the graduate. And I started my answer with, well, I feel. And I was told, we are paying you to think and not to feel. So it took me a bit of time to get to my intuition. I switched that off, except that in all the big decisions, it was always and all the big financial decisions that I made, it was always a question of, does it feel right? Because I am not a details oriented person, and I can't look at a spreadsheet and go, that's the problem, without doing a lot of sweat. But if I go, okay, where do I think this is? Where am I feeling it's coming from? That might guide me to it something to a little quicker. So yeah, bring in both, I say.
So is it intuition or is it judgment?
Well, I think they're interchangeable. I think these things, and it doesn't really matter. And lots of organisations, if you said this is my intuition, you'd be laughed out of town. So I think both. But what is judgment? Define, please. I mean, it's probably the result of a lot of experiences. But I was talking with a bunch of medical consultants the other day, and I said, go on, tell me that you've never walked into a patient room and gone, on no data, something's wrong, and you've been correct. And they all said that they'd had that experience. So, is that their judgment? Is it their intuition? It's probably a mix of both. I don't really mind what you call it. The point is to use it.
Yeah, yes, and I would have said that maybe medical people may not admit it, but I think in most cases, a lot of what they do is based on intuition and judgment, because it's actually very difficult for them to work out what's going on based on the symptoms that the patient is getting, because it could be so many things.
Yes, and you just go, this is my previous experience coming to bear in what I'm now thinking. So yes, I do think it is informed by experience, by previous decisions, by other stuff that you've seen. And then there's just the random stuff that flies in. And you go, I have no idea where that came from, but I got it. So let's put it into the room. So you asked me a question about, how do we do more of this, and how do we? And I think the main thing is to talk about it and to say, because it is one of the last things that people don't talk about, and therefore how do young people know that this is important? So if we want to bring up young leaders and skill them up to as quickly as we can, and it looks like the world really needs that, we need to start saying, hey, this is important, and sharing our experiences, because we've all got them. And
it's kind of going back to the graduate question, isn't it, which is when we pay you to think, not to feel. And in a way, as leaders, what we've got to do is we've actually got to ask, so what do you feel about it?
Yeah. Or what's your gut telling you, and what hunch have you got about this? So if you don't want to use the intuition word, there's other phrases that you can use instead, to encourage people. And what would you do if I wasn't here? And how would you make, if you were sitting in my chair, how would you decide? So that you push people to make their own decisions in all of this, lead them along the path.
One of the other thing is, though, with intuition is you talked about it earlier on, is about bias.
Yeah.
How is it? How do we know it's not bias that's basically kicking in and not intuition?
Well, I think that's a really important question, and bias, and particularly confirmation bias, is something that we need to guard against. And there's a few tells, there's a few signs that you're using bias if you're only prepared to make a decision that you've made before, that you're cherry picking the data to support yourself, that you're interpreting information to confirm your thoughts, which goes along with the cherry picking. You're remembering facts that support your position, and you're discounting contrary evidence. So all of those would, to me, say, okay, hello, is this confirmation bias? So I think that you need to set up operating principles. So if you're making a decision, what are the operating principles that you're using, and can you articulate them? Are you bringing in diverse thinking? And so that you're bringing somebody else in, are you playing this off somebody else? In addition, I think that there's one other thing, which is go away and sleep on it.
Yeah.
If you've slept on it, I think that's the incubation process, and you're prepared to stand up and defend it and defend what you've got. Then I think, okay, go for it. But it's just having the very of checking your thinking helps you guard against confirmation bias. So check.
And you talked earlier about using intuition within group dynamics. How do you do that?
So I would set out to very deliberately do it. And if you want, get someone else in to facilitate your group, because I think it's quite hard to be in the process and manage the process, particularly if it's important. So I would, give everybody their pre-reads and whatever it is that they need, and kick off with how we're feeling about this. What's your intuition telling you? And get everybody to go around the room. Group leader goes last, because otherwise, guess what? They're creating the bias effect. and then look at the data, and then come back to, okay, what are we feeling or sensing in all of this? And I think it's really important to pay attention to energy. What is your energy, your internal sense of energy doing? You're feeling excited about this, or a little bit, and sometimes we need to feel a little bit scared. Scared is good. I always say, get out of bed and do something scary every day. but
yes.
So it's just get people to talk about those things, and every time you swing, you oscillate between the data and the intuition, but you kick off with your intuitions, because you haven't got any bias in there to start with. Because the minute that you start saying, well, I've read on page 34 and that number says, you start to influence everybody, and that's fine. That's part of the process, but I think it's a secondary part of the process.
So how does intuition tie with creativity?
Oh gosh, it's really interesting. My daughter's a shoe designer, and Kitty says that quite often when she's designing, it's almost as if she has to kind of she opens her brain up and boom, everything falls in. And architects talk about buildings arriving in the same way. And it's super interesting. But creativity doesn't need to be like that. And when you ask most people, they're saying they're not being creative. But actually, if you're a senior leader, what you're doing is envisaging a future and then the path to that future. That 100% is creativity. And it's fine to do it by yourself, but it's much better to do it with other people, because you come up with much better answers.
So how do you see intuition shape the future?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I think that we could make progress an awful lot quicker if we brought this into play and we did it deliberately, which is why I talk about bringing intuition out of the broom closet. If we use this thing, which we all have got, and it's only white, industrialized, educated, rich democracies that think, woo, the weird nations that think it's not helpful. But the minute that you talk to any other culture, they go, well, of course, what are you talking about? Of course it matters. So I think we could really advance ourselves, our businesses, our leadership, everything, if we actually put it into play.
Jess, thank you so much for coming on and talking about your book, Intuition at Work, using your gut feelings to get ahead. If I wanted to buy one, where would I get one from?
Amazon.
And where can we find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn, and I'd love to have a conversation. And I love hearing people's intuition and their experiences, what they've found for themselves and how it's worked out for them. So I'd be really super open to hearing those stories.
Fantastic. Jess, thanks so much for coming on today and talk about intuition. I think it's fascinating, and it's so much against kind of what we're told, that you kind of feel like you got to do it.
You got to do it.
It's part of the rebel in us,